Divine Rise, Grand Rising, Great Rising, blessed be to the day. May it be everything you require to get you to where you desire. Auxiliary motion. Auxiliary motion. What is auxiliary motion? If you look up auxiliary motion in the dictionary, it's going to give you the aspects of first the loom. Like the loom has its three primary functions, or how it weaves everything together. This primary is the aspect that controls the flow. So that's our heart. It controls the flow. Our mind is secondary, which is observes to make sure the process is going through. And the auxiliary is the aspect that regulates and teaches when to stop and when to go. So when we think about the auxiliary motions in our lives, it's heart chakra day. That's why we got on the green. To win the day, you got to understand the night before. That means going back to those shadows. For us coming into this space for ourselves, I want you to really think about why you put so much dependency on the auxiliary motions or the auxiliary aspects, the eternal aspects, to bring you to a certain space. I give you an example. The next time that you are in the mirror, close your eyes. And I want you to blow a kiss to yourself inside of the mirror. Do not make the pecking noise. That means just go through the motion. Did you give the kiss? Or are you dependent upon that smacking sound to set the tone for the kiss? The auxiliary motion simply regulates and teaches us. That's what we're supposed to be observing and going through the aspects of experience. Too many times we put ourselves into a space where we look for the external, even if we're not directly looking for it, or trying to find it, or try to bring it into that space, we depend on the auxiliary motion of whatever's in that situation, wherever we're at, to be the driving force of how we're going to react and how we're going to flow next. That's your gut. That's the gut instinct. But if my heart is not in line with my mind, then how can my instincts teach me anything moving forward? If my heart is not in line with my mind, remember, mind is heart. So if my heart has constricted flow based on the internal work that I need to do to clear my heart, then my mind is automatically going to observe everything based on that constricted thought process. So now this goes down into my gut, or into my auxiliary motion, following my gut instinct, and everything now flows in this synonymous rhythm. Remember, we're finding the cadences so we can retune ourselves, so we can bring ourselves back into that space where we need to be. We put so much emphasis on the aspects of our emotions being in the imbalance, or energy in motion. The energy in motion, that's why you eat with emotion. You eat a bunch of sugar. You either eating a bunch of tacos, or you're eating too much of one thing because it's a corresponding function to an emotion. Something that you have not brought into balance to yourself. So then when you start really going into the sciences of what you're eating, you're like, you know what? Oh, that's why I do that. Because it keeps me stuck within this space of comfort. I'm depending on this auxiliary. That's when we start depending on that auxiliary motion. Remember, the auxiliary motion is only meant to regulate. It's only meant to put you in the space of like, okay, I need to be doing this. This is why I need to stop. There's a lot of, yesterday when I was talking about that foreign exchange, the currency exchange, in that currency exchange, is the auxiliary motion is that rate that you get, that rate that you're seeing now. In order for you to get more of what you're trying to get to, it's going to require you to convert, or take that conversion rate into the free trials over. It's time for you to take that. You know what? I have been doing it at this rate for a long period of time, and now Because if you don't, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be sitting in that same position, expecting the things that are in auxiliary position in your life, in the external aspect. You're going to expect them to bring something to you that they're not tuned to do. You're going to leave them to bring things into you that they're not tuned to do. Remember, everything around you is meant to regulate and teach you something. Observing and experience. If you're not getting it from there, ask yourself, what am I not doing for myself? What is constricting the flow of my energy in order for me to complete my aspect of observance in this space? It's heart chakra. Let's open it up. This is when you start being honest with the things that are on your heart. The things that have been on your heart for so long inside of that space. This is when you start looking and stop depending on the auxiliary motion. I remember sitting in spaces depending on the auxiliary motion. Let's get deeper into the aspects of the auxiliary motion. One of the biggest auxiliary motions for a lot of us is going to be that stimulus check that's coming. That's an auxiliary motion. I have not yet controlled, just like when the unemployment happened, I had the thought process, my process, I already had control or observed how I was going to make that flow, making that decision. My mind then came into the process of observing what I was going to do based on the way I was going to flow forward. So then when my gut kicked in, my auxiliary motion kicked in, I started seeing the results of where my heart was flowing to and fro. What I was letting go of, my new sights was going to go higher, and now I'm in that space. So now that I know that worked for me, now I can continuously keep making this motion. I'm not dependent on the aspect of something external to set the parameters of what I'm doing, because I'm within my heart's purpose. I'm moving in my heart's path. I'm moving in the direction of my heart. Everything that I've done up to this point, for me, from my fast to getting back into these spaces, is to cultivate the flow of my heart. To open up this flow of my heart. To remove what I needed, to remove what I depended on in an external sense in order to keep my heart flowing in a certain direction. To keep me and my mind flowing in a certain direction. That causes that constricted thought process. So now I'll be sitting in a position I couldn't see. I will only see through one ventricle. I will only be able to flow through one ventricle or the other. I couldn't flow openly. This is when I was talking about. This is when I talked about the aspects of that cognitive bias. When I'm looking at things based on affinity, or I went to school with them, I was in the same place as them, so I'm gonna rock with them. Or I'm rolling in the thought process of myself when I'm looking at the halo effect. I'm only looking at the good things that this person has done for me, or the positive aspects of what this individual has done for me. But I'm not looking at the negative aspects in contrast that gave the energy to what they're doing in this space for me. Last night when we did in the episode, that common denominator in your life for everything that's ever happened in your life is when you were the negative, you had something outside of you was the auxiliary, was the positive. So it was there for you when you were in that negative state. But what happened when you really observed the negative state? My bad, I know you jamming. What happens when you really start observing the negative states? What is the reason? When you really start observing the negative state, that means you're looking at it with your true mind, and you're discussing it with the flow of your heart, and you're opening your heart to it to become vulnerable. What happens to the auxiliary aspect in your life? How does that help you flow? How does that help you focus? How does that bring you into the space that you need to be in? These are the things you start looking at when you really start working with your heart. When you allow yourself to come into that vulnerable space. And I know it's scary. There were so many things in my heart. When it opened, I was sitting there trying the entire time to be like, nah, let me shut it off. Let me shut it off. Let me shut it off. Let me stop. But I had to surrender to the process. It's synonymous steps to surrendering my breathing to the process. Some of y'all breathe really, really fast. Don't even understand that you have an infant heart rate. Because you haven't learned how to control your breath. You haven't learned how to control your steps. This is the stuff that you start looking at when you start doing it, when you start analyzing yourself. If you've seen the movie G.I. Joe, you remember when Whitesnake slowed his heart rate down to 0? That's where your heart rate can naturally, you can control your heart rate. I don't even use the heart rate monitor at the gym anymore because I can control my heart rate. Slow that bitch all the way down, but I can turn my heat all the way up. That makes me further and more into control of yourself. That discipline to yourself. As you start to open up, you can become, that discipline happens. You stop depending on the auxiliary aspects to bring you into a certain function. And this is the process of purging. Because when I take, now that I don't feel that need for the bump, because that black bottle of bamboo is strong as fuck anyway. But when I take my 3 shots, when I'm setting up a ritual, like setting up that ritual for my speaking to the spirits and bringing it into that space, that shit hit me differently. Because it's not based on the need or the want. It's based on the aspect of the feeling. Me being open to the space. This is your difference. When you're following your flow, that opens up the aspects of how you observe things, and then it affects how you take it in right here. Where your soul's at. Your soul's being fed. Is it nourishing your soul, or is it getting stuck somewhere up here in your mind, feeding those memories? Ask yourself the question when you open up your heart. When you're flowing everything out, is it getting stuck and feeding the memory? Or is it getting down and being able to feed your soul? That good old soul food. Take that deep breath in. Hold that breath. Allow that breath to expand, that deep breath to expand. Allow it to open up everything here. Allow it to open up everything. If your heart's feeling tight, whatever space is feeling tight, that's the tight space you got to release in. But we right here at that heart chakra. So if your heart chakra is tight, if these are tight and your heart chakra is becoming tight, it's time for you to actually start doing that heart work, doing that inner work to your heart. But ultimately, I want you to be the best. Ultimately, I want you to be the best. I want you to get everything that you desire. And the only way to get everything that you desire is actually doing the internal work, becoming empty so you can now be fulfilled in everything that's required. I want you to be the fucking best. Open up your heart. Become that vulnerable aspect. And if you need that, GodaCoAlchemistLLC.com. Everything from the readings to natal charts analysis to that shadow work consultation to get you into that, so we can get you into that psychotherapy and get you into that work and help you open up. I want you to be the best. I love you. We love us. Ashe.